Hello, this is a presentation with Dr. Louise Waal, who's campaign manager for Bloodlions. And we're talking about creating awareness for the lion industry, which is a terrible thing which is going on in South Africa. And I want to make a brief introduction to Louise to the audience. So one can understand what she does. With an academic and research background in environmental management and a passion for Africa and wildlife conservation, Louise's career focus has evolved over time. Starting her career in 1990 in academia, she later founded Baobab Travel in 2002, a tour operator fully dedicated to providing sustainable tourism services in Africa. Following the sale of the business 12 years later, she continued a freelance sustainable tourism consultant with Green Girls in Africa, assisting tourism businesses to travel the road to sustainability. During this time, Louise spearheaded Hands Off Our Wildlife campaign in response to the many unethical and often cruel captive wildlife encounters on offer in our South African tourism space. During this time, she already started to work with Bloodlions team. More recently, Louise became instrumental in the establishment of the coalition to stop the captive breeding and keeping of lions and other big cats for commercial purposes. She is the coordinator and sits on the steering committee, lobbying and governmental and other stakeholders involved in this space. Welcome, Louise. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
Great. So we've got a few questions for you for the audience, and this is going to be replayed over time. Our first question, just so we can get our audience in tune with what we're talking about today, is what is canned hunting, and how long has canned hunting, captive hunting, been around for?
Yeah, captive hunting, canned hunting is kind of used in the same way. Canned hunting or captive hunting of lions in South Africa has been around since sort of the mid-late 90s. I think it was 1997, the Cook report actually exposed the canned hunting activities in South Africa, and what it is actually it's part of a bigger life cycle of captive lions. So captive lions are bred in captivity in South Africa. They're used for petting and walking in tourism activities. They're used to attract paying volunteers from overseas. Then once they are too old and too boisterous, too dangerous to use in tourism, they often go back to holding facilities or breeders until they mature, and then they are used in either the canned hunting industry or for their bones and other body products. And the captive hunting industry differentiates itself from wild lion hunting, that we are dealing here with captive bred habituated lions that are basically thrown into a smallish enclosure that can be any kind of size, and they can be hunted, legally hunted, in some of our provinces within 96 hours of release. But we know that very often happens much earlier. So the lions can't escape. There is no fair chase, as the hunting fraternity would call it. And hunters can basically pick a lion from a menu virtually to be hunted for their trophies.
It's a terrible, terrible business. Now, how many lions are there in this industry?
We are actually at the moment not really sure, because we don't know what the whole lockdown with COVID has done to the industry. The official figures from 2019 indicate that we have at least 8,000. At the time, we believe that was an underestimation. So it's believed that probably more closely to 10 to 12,000 lions in captivity. To just put that in perspective, we only have about 3,000 lions in the wild in South Africa. So 3 to 4 times more lions in captivity than in the wilds in South Africa.
That's absolutely terrible. Now, is the canned or captive hunting, is that just in South Africa, or is it taking place in other countries?
The epicenter, if you like, is certainly in South Africa. We are seeing it grow and occurring in some other African countries as well. But certainly South Africa is known for its captive lion breeding and hunting and the lion bone trade as well. And just also to reiterate, we're not just dealing with lions in captivity, we're also dealing with other indigenous species like leopards, cheetahs, caracals, servals, and exotic big cats like tigers, jaguars, pumas. So there is a whole range of other big cats bred and kept in captivity in South Africa as well.
Yeah, it's just terrible.
And used for commercial purposes, I should add. These are not cats that are bred for conservation purposes.
Great. Well, we'll circle back to what can be done, but just on an intro note, is there a Bloodlions 2 in the works?
No, not from our side, but there is a new documentary produced by a group of people, amongst others Richard Pearse. Lions, Bones and Bullets has just been launched at a film festival, and also Tiger Mafia with Carl Arman is also coming out very soon. Basically all focusing on very similar issues, but really since the making of Bloodlions, the industry hasn't really changed much. So in many ways, there hasn't been a real need to make a Bloodlines 2, because it's still pretty much the same as it was in 2015 when Bloodlines was launched.
That seems amazing. That, I mean, obviously it's created a lot of awareness, and hence we're on the phone, we're discussing. There's a lot of people who this has been brought to their attention. And the media is also covered around it. So why do you think that it hasn't brought more attention to bringing the actual demand down?
Yeah, that's always a really good question, and I don't really have an answer to that, to be totally honest. It has been allowed to grow by our governments. There are people that believe that maybe the department had financial gain from it, but whatever it is, the industry has been allowed to grow, although this year, after a long consultation of more than a year by a panel of experts called a high-level panel, we now are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, because in May, the minister has actually announced that there is an immediate hold on the domestication and exploitation of lions in captivity, and to close the captive lion facilities as well. This is obviously not going to be something that is happening overnight, but yeah, processes are in place.
That's very good news. And that was from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. And it's a great decision that they've made. But what are the next steps that they have to do to implement this?
Yeah, they've already started. So we've just gone through a public participation on a draft policy position document that was written based on the high-level panel report, a report that was nearly 600 pages long, and that actually focused on 4 specific iconic species: the rhino, the leopards, the elephant, and the captive lions. So they are now finalizing this policy position documents, and then obviously amendments to legislation will need to be made. And yeah, in terms of the actual implementation, what that is going to look like, we don't really know exactly how that is going to happen. And of course, a lot of, amongst others ourselves, but a lot of other concerned organizations, we've all offered our supports where we can be of help and benefit, and where we have expertise to help the department in doing so, because it's a big task. You know, we are talking about 400 plus facilities, some of them involved in tourism, some of them involved in the breeding and the keeping, some of them involved in the trophy hunting, and possibly up to 10, 12,000 lions. You're not going to close that overnight. So, and that has to be done in a responsible manner as well, so that all those lions, yeah, it's going to be that issue as well. What are we going to do with the lions? So yeah, lots of interesting times, I think, ahead of us. But it was a very courageous decision by Minister Creasy to actually say, no, enough is enough. It's going to be hard, but we cannot carry on in this same, along this same pattern and continuing the status quo.
How are there loopholes in this legislation, and where do you see those loopholes?
Loopholes is difficult to say yet, because it hasn't been enacted yet, and legislation will need to be amended. Existing legislation will need to be amended, but there are a few areas of concern that we have pointed out to the departments. Some of them are quite technical, others not so. For example, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just lions that we're dealing with in South Africa, but lots of other big cats as well. And I think, you know, we cannot close a lion breeding industry down and not do the same with all the other big cats, because the industry will just focus on the next most economically viable species. So we have to extend everything that's going to apply to lions, we have to extend to all other big cats as well. So that is one of the areas of concern. I think another area of concern from a very personal perspective is that the reason why South Africa has been able to export legally lion bones from our captive population is because of an annotation to Appendix 2, CITES Appendix 2 for lions. And there's no clear intent at the moment to actually reverse that annotation. And I think that is very important to do that, and just to say, that's it, you know, no more, not for South Africa's captive lion, captive population, not for anybody. No lion bones can be exported under CITES in a legal way. So that's another thing that we feel needs to be closed down. So those were two of the sort of bigger concerns. I think also there is a lot of management and recording in terms of the rhino horn and ivory stockpiles that have been dealt with in that same report, but they're not dealing in the same way with the lion bone stockpiles that do exist in South Africa. And again, that is something that we need clarity on, such a coherent recording and management, and also disposal plan of the lion bone stockpiles. What is going to happen with that? And it should really be in line with that similar management plan for the rhino horn as well as the ivory.
I just want to ask a question. It seems, you know, you're mentioning lion bone stockpiles, and that being the case, obviously, if there are stockpiles happening, the demand is not there completely, or am I wrong?
No, that is the reason why there are stockpiles is that since 2018, so 2019, 2020, and so far 2021, the government, the department has not been able to set a lion bone export quota. Without a set quota, no lion bones can be legally exported from South Africa. And this happened because of a High Court case between the department and the NSPCA. And basically the High Court judge ruled, amongst many other things, that the department had to deal with the welfare issues before they can really start exporting lion bones under his ruling. So from 2019, basically that export quota has been set to 0. So there have been illegal consignment going out of the country. We know that because some of these consignments have actually been intercepted, but legally no lion bones could actually be exported. So they started stockpiling in the hope that the export quota would be reversed and back to what it was before. So for many years, there was no quota. So basically, as many skeletons were exported as they could, the demand would allow, basically. And then in 2017, after this annotation happened on CITES Appendix 2, the department basically set an export quota of 800 skeletons per year. And that was in 2018, 17 and 18, and then 19, 20 and 21, we've had a 0 export quota.
Right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. See, it seems that quota might lead us in the right direction if they've set it to 0 now, and then with this new ruling, things seem to be going in the right direction. Hopefully, and hopefully,
no, absolutely.
Hopefully there'll be no loopholes that people can jump through. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is the zoonotic diseases and the correlation to COVID. And so the first thing is, what is SIC5?
Right, so during the hard lockdown, we actually started and really being faced with, again, but on a global basis, with zoonotic diseases. We actually started researching the link between lions and pathogens that can actually transmit zoonotic diseases. So what we did, we reviewed nearly 150 peer-reviewed articles. And from that, we identified 63 pathogens that were affecting both wild and captive lions, and also about 83 different diseases linked to those pathogens. And we started going through all those diseases. So that was initially translated into a peer-reviewed article that came out, and that was actually adopted by the high-level panel as well, because it proved the direct links between lions and zoonotic diseases. And these pathogens can be transmitted from lions to other animals, both wild and domestic, but some of those can also be transmitted to humans. So we started looking for our campaign at those diseases that could actually be transferred to people. Being in the global pandemic of COVID-19, and we knew that COVID-19 was already transmitted to big cats, and we knew that mink, a different variant, transmitted from mink back to people. So we identified, I think it was 23 diseases that could be transmitted to people. And then we started looking at how these diseases, how infectious they were. And there were actually the sick 5 is basically the top 5 of those diseases. 2 of them are transmitted by ticks, so bacteria and parasites that are transmitted from animals to people by ticks. This African sleeping sickness, which is transmitted by flies, and then 2 that are more directly transmissible through, for example, soil contaminated with feces from animals. So yeah, we identified 5 diseases that are actually pretty transmissible, and one of them, the African sleeping sickness, which is has been identified as a problematic disease by the World Health Organization as well.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, what about, I just want to have a quick, not related to disease, but related to poisoning of animals in Africa. What are you seeing? And we before COVID was, in full force, there was a lot of poisoning of animals. Is that still going on in South Africa?
Yes, if you say poisoning of animals, I assume that you are referring, amongst others, the poisoning of vultures, for example. Yeah, it certainly happens. I know that there's people who are at the moment doing a lot of research, but also awareness creation with local communities and traditional healers. Because a lot of that is linked to what we call the multi-markets. So those are the local markets within South Africa and sometimes slightly further afield in Southern Africa in terms of the use of wildlife products in traditional healing locally. So that very often those wildlife products are not actually exported, like, for example, the lion bones to Southeast Asia. What we also see specifically with lions is there is a poaching going on as well, even of captive lions, but also wild lions. And then very often, mostly the paws and the face is targeted. So obviously there is a demand for claws and teeth. And only last week, actually, the hawks, the green scorpions, they, together with some other government organizations, they did several raids, and they found over 4 kilograms of lion teeth, nearly 1 kilogram of claws, and then also bones that were already processed into a gelatin. So yeah, and we don't know whether, at the moment we haven't heard anything, and I don't know whether the hawks will know, but whether those teeth and claws and the bones, whether they actually came from the captive population, or whether those would actually be wild lions. That is something we don't know, and that also needs a lot more research. Because those links are not really made at the moment. We don't know, for example, when wild lions are being poached and the paws, the claws and the teeth are being targeted. Is that for domestic use, or is that actually exported to Southeast Asia? We don't know. Yeah, we expect both, but
yes, yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to education. And I know with a sub-campaign of Bloodlions, how is Youth for Lions doing? And yes, what are you finding out about the youths and their involvement?
Yes, Youth for Lions has become a spin-off of Bloodlions. It's very much, it started with the volunteering market in mind, because a lot of the younger people are targeted to come and rescue and help rearing these orphaned lions and other big cats. And so that is the background to the Youth for Lions campaign. And it was really focusing on raising awareness around volunteering and the issues involved, and to guide them towards responsible volunteering where they really make an impact on conservation, proper conservation projects. So that is really how Youth for Lions started before COVID. So there is a before COVID and after COVID life, isn't there, at the moment? But before COVID, we did quite a lot of school presentations as well. And for the slightly older kids and at universities, we would do screenings of bloodlions to raise awareness around the captive breeding and keeping industry. So yeah, it's although Bloodlines is very much focused on hard facts, very much science based and founded. Campaigns like the SIG5 was obviously a campaign that evolved from a scientific study that we did together with the World Animal Protection. The Youth for Lions is not so much the sort of the coal face of the campaign, but more trying to involve the youth and raising awareness and educating them. And we have a really nice youth ambassador program as well that we're actually redesigning at the moment. So ambassadors who are really spreading the word and doing presentations within their own school, sharing the messages on their own social media. We even had some of our ambassadors actually during the lockdown come up with a campaign, the Ban Wildlife Markets campaign, which became really successful. So yeah, some of the youth are awesome. They are just so switched on, and you know, I'm an old fossil and they're speaking their peers' language as well, which is so important. If we want to get the message across, then, you know, we need to listen to the language that the youth is using and understanding and relating to.
Yeah, we have a youth board too, so we should connect the two, and we're just passing the baton from some of the older ones to a new generation. But they've made
absolutely.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of accomplishments as well. But we'd love to connect with your youth board so they can you know, see what their commonalities are and how to create awareness in the schools and all the same things. And I think it's very important.
The youth are our future. You know, if we can't get the youth to be mobilized and be interested in conservation, then there is no future. So they are the future. So no, absolutely. I think it would be great because it would be so nice for them to see how things are done in other programs as well, and you know, sharing of ideas. And so yeah, would be a great idea to do that.
Let's connect offline on that one. And our lot have made a video as well, and they've done we have a program in schools, and it's it's very interesting. The more we get involved with, you know, people on the ground in Africa and bring them into the schools in the US, creating that awareness, it's amazing how these kids react, because a lot of them have just absolutely no idea what's going on. And once they do know, they become very proactive. So it's definitely very, very, very important to have that, which leads me to my very last questions, is awareness. And what are you finding the most effective way of bringing consistent awareness to consumers about the lion bone trade, canned hunting and conservation? And ultimately, what is the best way of saving these big cats?
Sure, that is quite a difficult question. But yeah, we believe that part of our success is based on the fact that we are always using as much as we can scientific evidence. That is underlying our campaigns. So we try to keep the emotion out of campaigning, because on emotions, we can actually argue. On morals and ethics, we can argue that, my morals are different from somebody else's. On hard scientific facts, there isn't much we can argue on that. So to us, that is a key component of campaigning. So that means that we continuously either need to do the research ourselves, work with other people who are doing research on the ground, and get that consistently out to the people. What we did, for example, with the zoonosis, which was a topic that is difficult for people to understand. It's quite technical. So we actually created a document, a whole campaign, different graphics to actually break it down and break it down in pieces, in small messages that people can actually understand and relate to. Because if people can't understand what you're trying to say, they're switching off. So it's up to us to break the messages down into bite-sized pieces and in a way that appeals to people, that people finding easy to understand. So graphics and short video clips are all part of a successful campaign which works for us. And obviously mobilizing and utilizing the various social platforms, and working with other organizations as well to amplify the message through other organizations, and likewise the that is certainly, and then I forgot what the last question was.
The last question is what is, I mean, you basically answered it, but how can we save these big cats? What is the biggest answer? And whether it's social, whether it's going through social or the youth board or the science, what do you think is the way we should be doing this?
I think it's a combination. It's educating people, especially in terms of tourism activities, educating and raising awareness around welfare issues involved with interacting with captive wildlife in general, but big cats in specific. Same for the volunteers. It is lobbying with governments, making sure that, and certainly now, to make sure that we're supporting government in phasing out the industry. And as we said, the youth are the future for conservation. So it's really also encouraging the youth to take an interest in conservation. And if it wasn't for COVID, we would have done another Live Wild workshop, which is all focusing around conservation careers. I think that is so important. It's crucial.
Excellent. Yes, we agree totally on the awareness, and I think it's terribly important. One other thing is I know there are a lot of groups in South Africa that do similar things, some slightly different than what you do. How often do you kind of group together to talk to the government or do something like that?
In the last few years, the collaboration has become a lot better between NGOs. After a parliamentary colloquium in August 2018, we actually set up a Lion Coalition, which is a collaboration of lots of different NGOs. Obviously, Bloodlions is one of the few that has a mandate that is focusing purely on the captive lions. So I think a lot of the organizations obviously have broader mandates, but there is an overlap, and everybody agrees on the point that the commercial captive lion breeding and keeping industry needs to be stopped. And that has been a great platform to collaborate and to amplify our voices to the government and actually talk with a collective voice rather than lots of individual voices. And more recently, we've brought more people into the fold as well in terms of welfare issues. So yeah, I think the collaboration is getting much better. We cannot afford to continue working in silos individually, because we need to be much stronger, and the only way in doing that is to have a collective voice. That's the only way to be heard. So yeah, another one which is incredibly important. Not always easy, but very important.
Yes. Yes. Well, in closing here, is there anything else that you would like to tell everybody about? Is there any other point that we've missed that you think we should bring?
I think what I would like to reiterate, and that is not just an issue that exists in South Africa, but I know that there is a lot of what's called the ambassador species in American zoos, for example, as well. And I think I would like to really impress on people that these lion cubs and cheetahs, it all looks incredibly cute, but and whatever the messages that are being given, the reasons why these animals are being used and interacted with, has got very little to do with conservation and all to do with raising revenue and entertainment. And more studies are actually coming out right now, showing that to actually educate people and raise awareness, we don't need to interact. It's actually counterproductive, because people get so excited to be so close to, you know, a cheetah, or to be petting a lion cub. They get so excited to have their selfie taken that actually the information that's been given to them goes straight out their heads. And research is actually starting to corroborate that. So I would really like to say to people, please do not interact with any captive wildlife. It's not for the benefit of their welfare, and in most cases, if not all cases, it has nothing to do with conservation.
Right. Well, thank you for those words.
May I just ask something, if that's okay?
Please.
Because I've been driving the whole time, and I've just been so enthralled with your words and everything going on here. I wanted to ask, how is your you were doing billboards, right? Can you just say a little bit about the billboards you were doing, and do you feel like that is successful? Like, is that getting the message out? And can you tell me exactly what the billboard was? I thought it was like pet a cub, and then you could explain it better than me, but it was very effective.
Yeah, so we had a billboard campaign early in the year. The first time that we've managed to do that. It's obviously getting the message out to a much wider audience, because it's always a problem to actually not be talking to the same people and the converted very often, and that is quite often the case when we're talking about issues online. People follow us and people follow organizations for a specific reason, and very often those are already converted. So a billboard campaign obviously targets the general public and a much wider audience. So we were lucky to have billboards both on the freeways and in the urban areas. We had a few different graphics. We have some beautiful, if I'd known that, I I would actually could have shown them, but maybe we can sort of show them on your socials at a later stage. But we've got some beautiful graphics done by Patrick George, and they're very simple. Basically, they're sort of they're not real lions, they're drawings, quite childlike drawings, and one would say cup a pet, kill a lion. So it sort of shows somebody petting a lion cub, and then the other half of the graphic is a lion being shot for its trophy. There was another one with walking with lions, and so one half of the lion is actually splits in half. So the full line, the one half is somebody walking with the lion, the other half is actually its skeleton that's being exported. So they're very visual. The message is really, really easy to understand. So we were trying to raise awareness about, you know, when you are interacting with these animals, you're actually directly contributing to both the count hunting and the lion bone trade, because those are directly linked. It's just a big life cycle of these animals in captivity. And that was another little clip. We also had a little clip on a billboard, which basically is a conveyor belt, and it shows the life cycle of these animals in a conveyor belt manner, and that is what it is, because it's this commercial industry that as a conveyor belt, they're just churning out these animals and they're disappearing on the other sides. So yeah, they were hugely effective. And I was actually just emailing the company earlier today, because we would love to now be able to get that message out there, but a slightly different messaging, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, so that we need that continued support from people to keep the pressure on the process that is going on at the moment within the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. So yeah, was our first experience, but we've actually, the stats we were receiving from the Prime Media was actually that we've reached absolutely millions of people.
That's fantastic news.
Amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say thank you very, very much for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking to you again. And let's get together on the youth board. You know, I think this is a very good commonality that we can push forward.
I agree, Sebastian, and yeah, thank you for having us and raising awareness around so many conservation issues. You guys are doing such an amazing job, and you have got so many moving parts going. I don't know how you keep all the balls up in the air at the moment, but yeah, well done.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you.
So much,
Bye-bye.
Bye. Lovely to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Lovely talking to both you two. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Louise.